Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So, there's an elephant in the room. You might not be able to see it, but I can. It's standing right here on stage. This is a demonstration of augmented reality, or AR. So with AR, we now have the technology to overlay digital objects and experiences in the world right before our eyes. And we can see these worlds through a smartphone, or through a headset, like the Microsoft HoloLens. Designers are starting to dream up of magical experiences that they can create in AR for entertainment, for gaming, for education. But so far, the approach has just been to focus on the experience that they're creating for the user. I think that this is missing something. I think that given AR's ability to take over shared spaces and services all around us, that when we design AR, we need to design it for it to be used around other people and in public space. So I spent a year exploring, creating experiments around how AR could affect human interaction. How can augmented reality be more shareable? How can AR perhaps affect pedestrian flow out in the public space? And throughout these experiments, I noticed one thing, and that is when we're in AR, the way we see the world changes just a little bit. This is how we see the world right now, but if I pull up AR, this is how I'd see the world. And if you overlay the interface elements and the augmented elements, you can start to see how the user can be really distracted and not present. So what happens when augmented reality starts being on all our phones and all our apps, and we have distracted AR users out in the public space? I'd like to use the example of my friend Elisa. And so Elisa has an AR app that lets her look at digital public art in public space. And this time, she sees that there's one right here, so she pulls it up. It is in the sky. It's called Lanterns in the Sky. And Elisa's really intrigued about a particular detail, so she leans in for a closer look, and she steps just a little too close to the curb. Distracted AR users can put themselves into dangerous positions like this one. So how do we mitigate this? I would like to propose StreetSmart.AR, which is a framework for designing AR that is safer for users in public space. Beyond just creating a regular AR experience, designers will imbue safety patterns into that experience to make it street smart. If we go back to Elisa and use that example, so again, Elisa's looking at the art piece, but this time when she leans in, a boundary wall shows up around a foot from the curb, reminding her of the hazard in front of her. So she steps back, and now she can enjoy the art piece from the safety of the sidewalk. What you saw there was a street smart AR pattern that involved two steps. The first one was that the device intelligently sensed Elisa's position in proximity to the hazard. And so she stepped into a zone I like to call the buffer zone. This zone can't just be thought about as just being on one curb, but needs to be more of a city-wide system so that the AR applications can be street smart no matter where the users go. The next step was to trigger the safety pattern. And you saw a boundary wall example, but I'd like to share two more. Here's one. So let's say I'm designing something where I overlay an environment right before the user's eyes. Can we deliberately dissolve this environment? And so the user becomes again aware of the hazard in front of them way before they reach the street. Or, in the case of a game where you can steer the spaceship like through public space, can we use that movement and resist allowing the spaceship to enter a busy sidewalk or a red light? So when I was creating these patterns, I started realizing that there were some universally applicable principles for effective safety patterns. So here are three of them. The first one is clarity. Given that the user is going to be in a position of danger, things need to be as clear and immediately understood as possible. So we could just draw a line on the ground, but it's much more effective to put up a wall, even though that may seem a lot more intrusive. The second principle is considering the user's orientation. So the beauty about AR is that the user can be looking anywhere, but that's also difficult for an AR designer to pinpoint exactly where to put the pattern. You can't just design something that's fixed in a particular position in front of you, but you need to account for the fact that the user might be looking elsewhere, like upwards. And you design patterns that mitigate that, like this. The third principle is escalation. And this is the principle of increasing the strength of the safety pattern as you get closer to the hazard zone. So you could start off with a boundary wall, but if I keep on going towards the street, can I use audio and vibration and maybe a second wall? And if I push past the plane, can we actually take away the AR experience and force the user to step back to continue with it? These principles and more that I've learned have been compiled into a manual for StreetSmart.AR, where we allow designers to look at these principles and create their own effective patterns. And because these are principles, they can be applied to you looking at AR on your phone or on a headset. But something bugged me as I was putting together this manual, and that is this. We can't just expect designers and developers to take the principles that we give them and put in the time to design these patterns. We need to make it easier for them to imbue the street smartness in whatever they're building. And that looks something like this. For the designer, creating a stock pattern library of safety patterns that can be applied to any kind of experience. And for the developer, giving them easy tools to plug and play the street smartness into any app they're building within any tool that they're building it in. Now, everything that I'm talking about today is still a little ways out. It's going to take a while for augmented reality to be on our phones, in apps, and even longer for these street smart patterns to exist. But the one thing I'd like you to take away today is this. The first time or the next time you think about creating an AR experience, don't just think about the experience that you're creating for the user, but take into account what you're making the user do around other people in public space. Thank you.